So this is how I perform regular maintenance on my motorcycle. So first things first, I get onto a paddock because that makes dealing with it a whole lot easier. Then I slide a tray underneath it, get that oil plug open. And even though I just warmed up this motorcycle by taking it around the block, I am just gonna leave the tray there to keep draining because oil is still gonna drip out from the top of the engine down into the tray, so I might as well do all the other services while that's happening. Next part is to remove the seats, so I remove the back seat, remove the bolts holding in the panel, which by the way always breaks on these sort of motorcycles. Like there's little tabs that hold this fairing piece on, yeah, those things always break. Unbolt that, take that little fascia off, then take out the bolts holding the main seat on, and then just yank it out. Usually right now I do a battery check with a multimeter just to check if it's charging correctly, but I literally bought this battery like no more than 3 months ago and everything was working fine, so I just left it as is. So instead I just went straight to the air filter. I removed the cover for the airbox and yank out the old dirty filter. And I grabbed a magnet because somehow I found some random washers and nuts in there. Apparently I have a wormhole inside my motorcycle because I do not remember where this comes from. I checked everything inside, nothing was missing, any washers, nuts, or bolts, and everything was sort of nickel plated, while the washers and nuts I found were zinc plated. So I have no idea where those came from. They probably came from my cargo carrying seat. I took the air filter inside and washed it up a little bit with some dishwashing soap and water. This is not an OEM filter, this is a reusable cotton filter. Don't do this with an OEM filter. If you have a regular paper filter, dispose of it. You can't wash it, it'll just choke your motorcycle. And the manufacturer did say to leave it to air dry outside, so just left it on the top of my gate while I do all the other maintenance items. The next item on the list was the spark plug, and to do that, I need to move the entire radiator out of the way so I can reach my hand from the front of the motorcycle to reach where the spark plug is. And to do that, I need to remove both fairings from the motorcycle, which was pretty easy enough. It's not the most complicated fairing in the world, but honestly, it could have been easier. I would not have really minded if Honda put more screws on the outside instead of putting them all on the inside where you have to do weird maneuvers around the tires to actually get to them. Also, the user manual says that you could put your hand through this little triangle on the side of the frame and get the spark plug out from in there, but that is a lie. I have S-size hands and I cannot generate enough torque with my hands to get that spark plug out. And you're better off just removing the entire radiator and saving yourself the trouble of trying to maneuver a ratchet wrench into there. So anyway, now that I got the spark plug out, I just inspected it to see if it's wearing normally. It looks pretty normal to me, so I just brushed it off a little bit with a brass brush to get it all cleaned up and got the feeler gauge out to see if it's still within spec, and yeah, it's still within spec, so it's still good to go. I don't need to replace it. Now that the spark plug is clean and it's confirmed to still be within spec, I just thread it back in. And I'm being really light while trying to seat this back in. You really do not want to cross thread a spark plug. It's a pain in the butt to try and fix, mostly because you're either going to take it to a machine shop where they're going to have to weld and machine a new thread for it, or you're just going to have to replace the block itself, which is either way, it's expensive either way. And while I really should buy a torque wrench, I just sort of like feel using my calibrated elbow how tight it's supposed to go in there. I mean, most shops around here, they also rarely bring out their torque wrench just for spark plug maintenance, so I think this is probably gonna be fine. And while I'm down there, I took the front brake off and just sprayed a little bit of brake clean in there. And while I know it's a meme, this motorcycle's brake pads aren't huge. You don't need to dump an entire can of brake clean onto it just to knock off some dust. You just need a little bit, knock off a little bit of the dust, and that's it. Just a few sprays, that's good enough to get your brakes working optimally again. Once that's done, I just bolt the brakes back on, and again, you should really use a torque wrench for this, but a calibrated elbow is probably good enough, so whatever. Go up to the controls and give the brakes a few pumps to get the brake pads to engage with the rotors again. I went to a local shop and the mechanics call this mochok gremia, which has a very unfortunate translation, which I just thought was kind of funny. But that's most of the maintenance items done, so I just plug up the drain hole and get ready to pour in the new oil. I've been using this fully synthetic oil from Shell with the factory specs according to my owner's guide. There's some shops in Indonesia that'll tell you once a motorcycle is as old as mine. Mine is like 7, 8 years old to get an oil that's slightly thicker to preserve engine life. Maybe that applies to some motorcycles, but to mine it didn't really make a difference. This motorcycle takes a liter of oil for an oil change, 1.2 liters if you're doing an engine flush, but the mechanic that was maintaining this motorcycle before I started using it daily, he said he always just pours 1.2 liters in anyway, and so that's just what I've been doing. Close that hole up, and while I'm down here, check on the coolant levels, and it's still good. There's still plenty in there. And also the reason why I'm liking the Shell brand more than the Honda approved SPX brand is because even though the motorcycle's written oil change interval is 2,000 clicks, in just 1.2 thousand clicks, my motorcycle would start running a little rough, and I don't like it. So I decided to take my friend's advice and try using Shell. And with Shell, it was running smoothly even at 2000 clicks, and when I looked at the oil looked significantly cleaner and less degraded than with SPX even after significantly longer running inside the engine, running hotter inside the engine. I don't know for sure where Honda Indonesia is getting their oil from, but I do say they really need to find a better supplier because like right now it's just not worth the money for the consumers. Went outside and poured all the old oil into a container because while I don't care for the creepy crawlies living in the sewers, I'm not just gonna dump this into my wastewater supply because that would be very irresponsible of me. So I'm just gonna take it out back, use it for lubricants or lighter fluid until I can find the time to take it to a waste disposal center. Checking on the air filter, it's finally dry, and you can see the new guy walking in right now while I'm spraying it down. The manufacturer didn't tell me to do this, but if you take a look at cotton air filters from companies like K&N, they tell you to spray a small amount of air filter oil onto the air filters to catch some of the finer particulates that might pass through the filter. I do not have oil made specifically for air filters, but I've just been using chain lube and spraying a thin coat of it onto the outside of the air filter, and that works good enough to catch some of the fine particulates. In fact, the filter gets a little dirtier faster than the OEM filters, which you think is a bad thing, but like that just means it's catching more particulates from the air compared to the OEM filters, which is nice because the whole point of me buying this racing air filter was to save money by being able to reuse it instead of having to throw it away every 4,000 clicks. Reinstall the air filters, put the cover back on, and light up the engine to see if everything's working well. The lights turn on normally, the fuel pump whirls normally, the motorcycle starts normally. Do a little test here to see if there's any noticeable throttle lag. One time I had a very noticeable throttle lag and the RPM limit dropped to like 7,000 RPMs. But here everything was working normally, there was no noticeable throttle lag. So now that I'm sure all the engine-wise maintenance has been completed, I just went to odometer and replaced it, so now it can count back up and tell me when I've completed 2,000 clicks for the next maintenance. The only thing left to do is put all the fairings back on and check if electronics are all working correctly, and that's about done. And when I first was trying to do maintenance on this motorcycle, it would take me so long to take the fairings on and off. It would take me like 30 minutes to an hour just to take the side panels off. But like now, it only takes me like 5 to 10 minutes to do it. So it might seem a little unintuitive at first if you own a motorcycle with big fairings. It might seem like a pain in the butt to take them off. But at least with the Big 4 motorcycles, it's actually not too hard once you learn where all the bolts are supposed to go. Once the side fairings are reattached and the turn signals are wired back in, I did a little test to check all the lights work, and it was in fact working. So all that's left to do is put the seats back on and take it outside to do some walk around shoots. And yes, if you can't tell, I still haven't gotten the hang of ninja walking with a camera, but I think it's serviceable. And yeah, that's my regular maintenance done. I think I did a pretty amateur job at it, but I like to think that it's serviceable enough. What do you guys think? Do you have any suggestions to give me? Or like, what's the quirk with your motorcycle? Why don't you tell me in the comments? I would like to know what the quirks are with some other motorcycles and their maintenance. That's all I have to say. See you later.